stop and really hone in on who your target audience is. It's basically little snippets of code that we can put in the back end of the website to help the indexing robots like read everything better. And no agency is going to tell you they're going to do a bad job with your SEO. Every agency is going to tell you they're going to do a good job with your SEO. Yeah, I'm going to build you a really well optimized Squarespace website. I would say, not so sure about that. And, we're still talking to computers here. So we need to make it as straightforward as possible for them to understand.
Like, these are mostly residents. I care about these specific keywords, and I don't want broad match. I want very narrow, defined, exact phrase match. I want to make sure that what people are typing in is what they're looking for. All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Evernest Property Management Show. I am one of your hosts, Spencer Sutton, and today I don't have a co-host. Matthew Whitaker is at NARPM National Meeting in Orlando, and he left me to run the business all by myself. So I'm single-handedly running Evernest by myself. I'm kidding. I'm just here recording podcasts. So I don't have a co-host, but I do have a special guest. And today we're going to be diving into this is going to be a series of marketing podcasts, and this is all about how to attract more landlords in the age of AI. And this is something we've been talking about a lot here at Evernest. So I've brought on the director of marketing for Evernest, Kayleen vonSchondorf, and Kayleen is she runs the show over here. She manages the team and makes sure that everything is, I guess I would say the trains are running on time. So Kayleen, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much, Spencer. Stoked to be here with you.
Yeah, we've had you on here before. It's a long time ago, maybe a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago. But thanks for showing up with us. And we want to talk about, because Kayleen, you and I have been talking a lot about this behind the scenes here, and I thought we'd just record some podcast episodes and talk to other property managers about how they should be thinking, and maybe even how we're thinking about AI, about the like things that aren't going to change even with AI, and things that maybe are changing that they should be thinking about. And I think you're the perfect person to discuss this with, because we are like knee deep in this. And so why don't we kick off? So let's talk about first, Kayleen. Let's talk about the basics. So I think this first episode should really be about the basics. And if you're a property management company out there and you're struggling with marketing, maybe you're not getting as many leads as you think you should get, let's really just kind of focus here on the foundation. And so, Kayleen, when I think about that, I think about like some things will never change. And the first thing that I think about is who your target market is. Why don't you talk a little bit about the importance of clarifying to you and your marketing team, or if you're the marketer, maybe you have somebody who's doing marketing for you as an agency, who your target audience is.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's such a fundamental step to approaching any marketing strategy for any business, is you have to stop and really hone in on who your target audience is. We know running a property management business that it's people who own rental homes or would like to own rental homes, but who are those people really? What are their likes, their dislikes? What are they doing online, offline? That is going to allow you to create content that really speaks their language and finds them where they are. So we want to make sure that we're going to be visible to them in the places where they're spending their time online, and that we're speaking their language. We're talking about the nuances of owning a rental property and the pain points that resonate most with them. So until we've done that exercise of identifying who those people are as specifically as possible, we're just going to be creating really generalized messaging, and we don't want to do that. We want to avoid that. We want to make sure that we're being as specific as possible. We're identifying their pain points and we're meeting them where they're at, right?
Yeah, and I think this is something that you can continue to build on, right? It's not just hey, let's do this once and forget about it. We've got our avatars. It's something that we're continually doing. We're continually getting feedback from the sales team about, hey, different questions that people are asking or different struggles. And obviously, we're looking at the market as well and determining what are the challenges in the market. Because what we've come to realize initially, what we did was we said, hey, here are we think these are the real estate investors. These are people who are intentionally out trying to build portfolios of rental properties, and we call those Mike and Mary, the investor. And then we have Susie and Steve, the homeowner. These are the accidental landlords. And so with the shift in market, right? So when 3 years ago, the market was super hot, low interest rates, there was a plethora of real estate investors in the market, and anybody could sell their house. And then when the market slowed down, higher interest rates, we saw a shift in more more Susie and Steve homeowners coming into the market. And so we're like, oh, we really need to amplify this voice and create content for this. So I think that's probably the first thing you need to do is just really clarify your avatars. And then the next thing, Kayleen, that we always talk about is, what good does it do, right? If you don't have your, like, what we call a digital house in order. And the way I think about that is your just website. So what are your thoughts about just, yes, you have a target audience, but how should you prepare your website for visitors to come there and for that message to resonate?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, do you exist if you don't have a website? I'm not sure that you do, especially in this day and age. It's the number one way that people are going to go about finding you, whether they're conducting that search via Google or whether they're asking their phone, as people like to say, or asking an LLM. It's really important that you have a high quality website that encompasses all of your services, talks about your service area, has some helpful resources for your clients to explore and get to know you and build trust and credibility. Help them decide if they're going to pick up the phone and make that phone call to you, or if they're going to send an email or submit a form. There's this whole trust building and information layer that has to happen on that website before somebody's going to move through the funnel and become a lead, become a conversion for you. Thinking about things like what information is available on your homepage, overviewing the services that you offer right there, things. And this is so important to think about whether you're a local property manager, so you're really focusing on a single specific market, or if you are covering multiple markets, talking about your service area if you're covering multiple markets. Looking at that homepage, having a user experience that guides people to click on the pricing page, learn more about your services. Is there some sort of informational offer you can give them? Like on our website, we have the free rental analysis. So that's a huge trust building exercise and informational opportunity for potential customers that are coming through to our website. They can get that free rental analysis and say, oh, wow, these people can really help me figure out how to price my home, what it's worth in the market. I think I'm ready to take that next step and make that phone call, learn more about their services.
Yeah, I also think about this. Like, we want to, as best we can, when somebody lands on a page on our website of this is a landlord, whether they're an investor or just an accidental landlord, we want to build trust as quickly as possible. And we don't really necessarily want it just to be a brochure, right? So a lot of people build websites that are just like they just throw up information about their company and they think that builds trust. I don't think it does. I think you need to obviously you want to communicate benefits to them. You want to communicate like why you are trustworthy, but ultimately the way you do that, I think, is to communicate to people what you can do for them and to prove that you've done this successfully for other people. Now, if I was a local property manager and I was doing this, I would just have all kinds of testimonials from people who in the market. I would have tons of information about the local market. about the rental, about the market. I would do probably market updates every quarter and just say, hey, here's what's going on in X city. This is what we're seeing from rental rates and from days on market, et cetera, et cetera. It's a little bit harder for somebody like us to do that because we're so big, but building trust is very, very important. And to your point, Kayleen, then if you've built trust initially, then it's not a huge leap to get them to fill out the form that says, find out how much your property, how much you could get for rent on your property, right? It's that what we call a rent range request, and they're filling out that form. Before they fill out the form, there needs to be some type of trust there, because what we're doing is then we're following up with a call. And so when somebody calls and says, hey, I'm from Evernest, I saw that you filled out this form. If there's no trust, they're not going to pick up the phone. They're not going to call back. They're not going to respond to the email. And so building trust, I think, is the best way to do that on the website. What other things are just really important for a website, Kayleen, that we should probably mention right here?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think also, like, piggybacking off that sentiment of how do we build the trust with the users that are coming to the website, we can bring that right back to the very first point that we were making about understanding your target audience and knowing what their pain points are. I think knowing what their pain points are, that's going to help them feel seen, and that's going to be part of that trust building experience for them. So, you know, who doesn't suffer from not enough time? I feel like not enough time is the number one pain point across all industries, but specifically for our target audiences when we're talking about landlords. Like, if we want them to engage a property manager, the number one pain point there is probably, I don't have enough time. I don't have enough time to answer the maintenance calls. I don't have enough time to chase them down for their rent payments every single month. I don't have enough time to find an electrician that can be ready to go over in the next 12 hours or whatever. So if we can start addressing that pain point with the content right off the bat, not enough time to manage your rental property, hire a property manager that can take care of that for you. So, connect those dots, connect the dots between the who is my target audience, what are their pain points, and how am I going to address that right off the bat on the website, not just not just services, but really touching in on that. So I think that's part of creating the user experience and the content on the website so that we are resonating with the target audience, right?
Yeah,
Right.
I think that's a great point. The thing that I always said was probably the biggest fear. So I always wanted to pinpoint what are people's fears when they start thinking about property managers. Why are they reaching out? Yes, I think time is one of them, but then I also think because people act quicker and on fear than they do on pleasure. So we don't really talk about, oh, think of all the rental income you can get. Instead, we talk about, hey, we will protect your property and make sure that we put a great resident in that home who takes care of your property. Oh, we want to make sure that you get paid every month, right? So the fear is that they don't get paid. The fear is that that their house gets destroyed. And so we want to alleviate those fears. And to your point, Kayleen, we also want to make sure that you have enough time to enjoy your family, to do the things that you should be doing, and not necessarily getting phone calls in the middle of the night about toilet that's not working. So
Yeah.
technical? What about more technical stuff, Kayleen? That I had written up here as we were talking about this. Yes, obviously we want to have pricing on there. We don't want to hide pricing. We want to make sure it's very, very visible. But what about underneath the hood of the website? What should people be paying attention to who are building these property management websites?
Yeah, absolutely. So even though we're talking about the age of AI, there are still so many SEO fundamentals that apply to a well-built website. And so we want to be thinking about things like our meta titles and our meta descriptions. That's part of how we're communicating with the indexing robots. And additionally, thinking about things like schema. So that is something that a lot of people without technical SEO expertise are going to, raise an eyebrow at. Excuse me, what is schema and how do I implement that on my website? It's basically little snippets of code that we can put in the back end of the website to help the indexing robots like read everything better. So you said don't make your website a brochure. Absolutely. We need to, make sure that we have articulated exactly what the individual elements of the website are to a robot. So for example, picture of a house, they just see picture. So saying, hey, this is a headline, this is a subhead, this is the body copy, this is the call to action. It's just going to create clarifying context for the bots that are combing through that and trying to make sense of everything. So we want to make it as easy as possible for those bots to get through and say, oh, awesome. They've got headlines and subheads. They've got body copy. They've got buttons. They've got FAQs. They've got YouTube video embeds. They've got, a map of their service area. Well, if we embed a map, robot sees map, but we can use the schema to say, this is a map of the service area. And they say, robot says, ooh, yummy. Okay, I understand now.
Yeah, so and I think that applies to now. It's interesting because if you're building on WordPress, you're building on Webflow, then these are the things you need to be thinking about. Some people use vendors who handle all this. So what kind of questions maybe should if somebody's having a website built from a property management vendor, somebody who just builds websites on WordPress and Webflow, how can they determine whether their agency has done a good job with SEO on the back end of their website? I mean, listen, I know a lot of property managers. None of them that I know, for the most part, are web developers, and so they're mainly focused on operating an excellent business. What should they be asking? What kind of questions should they be asking?
Oh, that's such a great point because it is so easy to find an agency, and no agency is going to tell you they're going to do a bad job with your SEO. Every agency is going to tell you they're going to do a good job with your SEO. So you really need to make sure that you're asking some important questions about like how will you handle creating unique and distinct meta titles and meta descriptions for my business and my market area? Will your agency conduct keyword research on my behalf so that I can rest assured knowing that you're using actually relevant keywords with search volume potential? Will your agency be addressing technical SEO aspects like schema and structured data? So, even if that is an answer that's going to go, straight over your head, and like you said, yeah, you want to be good at property management. You don't want to be good at schema and structured data. But let's make sure that that agency that you're vetting is going to have that as a part of their scope of work when they're embarking on this project with you. There's also inherent advantages on different platforms. So, you and I both came from a WordPress you and I both came from a WordPress background, and we're really comfortable with the tools that are available at the back end to create a well optimized WordPress site. But there are platforms like Squarespace, Wix, that are not going to be so SEO friendly. So that's kind of a red flag right there, too, and something to look out for. If you're just hiring a contractor or a freelancer or even an agency that says, yeah, I'm going to build you a really well optimized Squarespace website, I would say, not so sure about that. So definitely want to see that on a platform that's just inherently enabled to have more robust SEO functionality, like you mentioned, WordPress, or we're moving over to the Webflow platform now because there is just so much that we're able to do back end technical SEO on that Webflow platform that's going to help us get the upper hand here. So it's about the platform, and it's also about the languages, the coding languages that are being used to relay that information to the indexing robots.
Yeah, great point. And also, just as I was thinking about the website, something else that I mean, we have so many microsites, right? So each one of our markets has a website, but you should also be talking about the areas that you service, right? So if you're in Atlanta, you don't want to just talk about Atlanta property management. You also want to have pages that talk about Alpharetta property management or Marietta property management, these sub-markets within your market, so that Google also indexes that and says, oh, if somebody is searching for these small little areas, you are a property manager that services those areas. So just some things like that I think are really, really important.
Yeah, honestly, that's like $1 million advice right there. It has been such an important part of our strategy to define what are the neighborhoods and regions within a larger market that we want to make sure they're not just listed, but we're creating content for those to, convey to LLMs and search engines that, yeah, we're in Alpharetta, we're not just in Atlanta, Georgia. And that research process in of itself, I mean, if you're a local property manager, you're going to know that obviously, but if you're covering many multiple larger markets, having some research around what are the sub markets in this region that I want to make sure I'm addressing, that's really valuable.
All right, so let's move on. As we're moving, let's just kind of again more of the um, maybe more of the foundation of this. I just had written down like social media, local credibility. How should people be thinking about local market credibility? And I'm obviously thinking about GMB, which is Google My Business. There's all kind of things like LinkedIn you can be on, YouTube. I mean, there's all kind of social media platforms. You could be on Meta, you could be on Instagram. What do you think about these things, Kayleen?
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, your Google business profile is such an important asset for your business. So you want to make sure that you have, if the profile is already out there, make sure that you have claimed that. If it is not already out there, you get to create it from scratch, which is awesome. But this needs to be like first and foremost when you're thinking about how you want to set up your business online, because that is going to be the very first thing that pops up on the right hand side of the Google search results. It's going to show reviews, your location, pictures, your business hours, your contact information. It is quite likely that a potential customer, is going to see that and just make a call. We were talking about building trust and creating the conversion on your website, but some people might just up and convert right off that Google business profile. Some people might decide not to engage with you based on what they see in your Google business profile. So having control of that asset and making sure that you're using the opportunity to put 5-star reviews. If you have a good experience with a customer, and hopefully the majority of your experiences are positive with your customers, so you say, hey, it would really be advantageous for my business, it'd be really helpful, meaningful if you would go put a 5-star review on our Google business profile. And that also increases your search visibility in maps and things like that. So if somebody happens to, conduct their search via the maps component of Google, that Google business profile is going to just be crucial. And yeah, I think about building on LinkedIn and things like that as well. There's so much potential, especially when you're working with a local market. So if you want to be the Richmond property manager, you have the opportunity to build yourself as that on LinkedIn by the content that you're sharing, not just about your business, but about the community itself. So if you are saying, oh, I'm a part of the Chamber of Commerce here, like some of the discussions that are happening in the local level, that's showing your involvement, your dedication, your boots on the ground. I think that kind of credibility is really important.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I mean, I would, if I were in one simple like single market, that's all I would be talking about online. I'd be talking about it, on LinkedIn. I'd be talking about it probably not as much on Meta, but I definitely would be talking about it there. I'd be definitely be doing some YouTube content. But we're going to talk about content in a later episode. So let's get into LLM, like being discovered on LLMs. Now we're doing research, like we're using ChatGPT, we're using Gemini, we're using what are some other ones? Perplexity, and we are searching in all of these markets, and we want to see if we're showing up, because we have been seeing leads come in that are attributed directly to ChatGPT. Well, we want more of that because we know it's going to be happening more and more. And so if you were, Kayleen, if we're just talking about the basics, the foundation of like LLM discoverability, what are some of the things that you would that you would be talking to people about doing right now in property management?
Yeah, absolutely. The fundamental here is to think about how the user is engaging with the LLMs. They're asking questions. I know that's how I'm using them in my personal life. If I have a query, I'm asking a question, and so it that's the answer in of itself is creating content that asks and answers questions. So for a long time, we've included things like FAQs, frequently asked questions, on our websites. And that has always been a good practice from like a trust building perspective, from a user experience perspective. Well, that content is 1,000 times more valuable now because this ideally that is asking and answering the exact questions that users are going to be going to platforms like ChatGPT and Gemini and asking these questions. I mean, it could not get more powerful than a question like, how should I collect rent from my tenants? Okay, well, if we've written a blog post called, How Should I Collect Rent from Tenants? The LLM is going to say, and it's gonna suck up that blog content and say, here is the answer for you, and it's gonna link that back to us and say, this is the source, this is where I got this information from. So we're thinking again about the target audience, we're thinking about what their questions are and how we can provide helpful resources that directly, literally, blatantly answer their questions and ultimately guide them back to our website once they've digested that material. So I think the question and answer content format is going to be key. It already has been to an extent, but it is going to be much more so moving forward.
I also think it's even a little bit more than like just having blog posts about it, right? It's like, yes, we can do blog posts and we should do blog posts, but what do you think about just FAQ snippets of like, hey, here's a question and here's how we would answer it, not necessarily in a 1,000-word blog post, but maybe in a more short and concise way. Do you think that's advantageous for LLMs? Are they looking for that type of information as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the way that we're thinking about it right now is like we're trying to think about how we can stack all this content and be as useful as possible. So I think the front door is having a very robust FAQs section. So if we could come up with all of the questions that we think our target audience members might be asking, yeah, I want all of that literally written out in the FAQs section. And then I want to support it with material like more robust blog posts, video content, things like that. So I'm just thinking about the building blocks, all the pieces that we can put together that will add up to this very robust information architecture for the LLMs to digest.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to think about it. Like, how can you create as much content as possible to answer those questions through different formats? Because at the end of the day, going back to what we were talking about earlier, this is all about building trust. If you're the one that they go to, even if they're not ready to hire somebody yet, but you've helped them answer questions about, I may think about, okay, we're recording this, it's October, almost November. You know what? I think in the spring, I may want to lease my house out. I'm not really sure. I know I'm moving to Denver. I live in Atlanta. But I wonder if I should let pets in my house. I'm not really a pet person, and they start asking that question. All of a sudden, we're providing them answers. They're able to go on and find videos about this where we talk about it more in depth. Then what this does is just, again, it's just building trust. It's building trust so that when they're ready to do something, you want them to come and continue down the funnel. Yes, they entered the top. Now you want them consuming more content, and eventually they want to find out, well, how much can I get for rent, and who should I speak to answer my more nuanced questions? Even though we even want to have those nuanced questions, but there's going to be some that, obviously we aren't going to be able to answer all of those. So yeah, I think that's a great way to think about it. Anything else here?
Yeah, I mean, when we're thinking about creating written content to answer people's questions, I always just want to plant the seed of like including your location and service keywords inside that content. That is a step that is easy to forget and is just all the harder to do retrospectively. So, thinking about how to do that right out of the gate is so important. So if you're going to be answering a question like, should I allow pets in my rental property? That's a great opportunity to include rental property, property management, pet friendly rental property, things like that. All those location based keywords, highlighting, are you considering having a pet in your Denver based rental property? Well, now we've got Denver and rental property in the language right there. And, we're still talking to computers here. So we need to make it as straightforward as possible for them to understand. And I think that is just such an important quality component in content generation that is easy to overlook. So I'd just throw that little nugget in there as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, when we first started creating content back in, I don't know, 2014, we just we were not thinking about this. We were not thinking as much about search engines. I was just thinking, hey, what's the kind of information that I would want to read? And that's the first way you should think about it, right? You want to think about it from the lens of the person asking the question, but then you really do have to include some of the technical information just so that you can get in front of enough eyeballs. Okay, last thing I want to talk about here is, as a foundation, some people are big believers in paid ads. Some people are not. We think paid ads still matter, even in the age of AI. I think it's real important to run ads. And so the way we think about creating ads, we're thinking, obviously you can do pay per lead services, which we've used pay per lead before. We still use pay per lead. Even right now. Then there's pay per click. There's pay per impression. That would be more like Google display ads. But how do we, Kayleen, when I'm thinking like Google ads are going to be really, really important because people are still going to be searching Google. They're still going to be going there and typing these things in. And if you're not being found organically, or even if you are being found organically, you should still want to be found that way. Then I think about retargeting ads. If somebody lands on a certain page, retargeting them on other, like it could be through a display ad, could be through Facebook ads, retargeting. So how are you thinking about paid ads as a part of lead generation for us?
Yeah, I want to highlight that when you're setting up a Google Ads campaign, you also have the opportunity to leverage the entire display network. And that is so much larger than just getting that sponsored link at the top of the Google search results. If you are showing up in the display network, somebody could be browsing their favorite, online magazine, or they're learning about how to use specific pieces of tools and hardware, and you're over off on the right hand side in one of those boxes as a visual ad. That's building brand recognition, and that's giving them more opportunities to engage with you beyond just the Google search results. So I think leveraging the power of the display network through the Google Ads platform is still something that is a really robust and powerful strategy for property managers and other online businesses. Meta and LinkedIn and other platforms can offer you similar opportunities, but I just think that the size of the Google Display Network, you can't match that. That's a powerhouse right there for visibility. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's where most people kind of hang out. And the challenge that every property manager faces out there who wants to run Google Ads, or even who wants to hire an agency to run Google Ads, because that's what 99% of people do, is the fact that 80 or 90% of our search volume honestly comes from residents, and you don't really want to pay for residents to click your ads. And so it is extremely difficult. We have run our own ads. We've had agencies run ads. We've gone through several agencies that didn't really understand this, but the challenge is just how much money you can waste serving your ads to residents who click on them. And listen, we get enough leads from residents, so it's not like it's a waste, but we rather show these ads to potential landlords, and it's extremely difficult for people to understand this. I've had agencies who couldn't understand why I didn't want to run a branded campaign. Like, why don't you want to show up for your name for Evernest? I'm like, because it's usually residents who are typing that in. But your competition's doing it. I said, but your competition is bidding on your name. I said, I don't care. Like, these are mostly residents. I care about these specific keywords, and I don't want broad match. I want very narrow, defined, exact phrase match. I want to make sure that what people are typing in is what they're looking for. And so anyway, just it's a double-edged sword, I think, Kayleen, because yes, we are 100% believers in paid ads, but the other side of that sword is you can waste a lot of money if you don't know what you're doing.
Yes. So without getting too far in the weeds here, we have an opportunity when we're running campaigns on Google Ads to have negative keywords. And that means these are keywords that I've explicitly said I do not want my ads to display for these keywords. So we want to think about the search phrases that those residents are going to be typing in, rental properties in Birmingham, rental properties in Birmingham, Alabama. That's an example of they're probably looking for a list of houses to rent, not looking to rent their house. So kind of think about it through that lens of there's a Venn diagram. There are search phrases that apply to my target audience. There are search phrases that apply to potential renters. I don't want to include those in the swatch of keywords that I'm including in my campaign.
Yeah, and I would just say I would highly discourage you from running your own ads unless you know how to, unless you're prepared to continuously update your negative keyword phrases, because you're going to realize you're showing ads to people who are typing in things. You're like, that's not what I want to show them. And so you're going to have to, it's like, Graham and I talk about this in the office. It's like whack-a-mole. You're constantly seeing new keywords pop up that you're showing your ads to that you're like, oh, I don't want to show them for that. And so you have to constantly add to your negative key list, the keyword list, and it grows larger and larger and larger. And so it really is management. Like, it takes a lot to manage these Google ads for a property manager. And so if you have a vendor that you're using that's doing a good job, I think that's fantastic. I would just make sure, this is what we look at, I would just make sure that your CAC, your customer acquisition cost, and your DAC, your door acquisition cost, are in line with what you're okay paying. You know the lifetime value of a client. Are you okay paying? What is that number that you're okay paying? And if you're staying within that range, then I think it works perfectly. But I do think regardless, you should be having, you should have paid ads in your arsenal. So, all right, Kayleen, this is like just the initial conversation that we wanted to kind of set everything up with. The next couple of episodes, we're going to start building on this theme of AI, and we're going to talk about building, just a lead engine that converts, because top of the funnel is one thing, bringing them down the funnel to convert into a true lead, what we would call maybe an MQL or an SQL, sales qualified lead, is a whole nother thing. So we'll get into that next podcast. But thanks for joining me for this one.
Of course. Really looking forward to continuing this conversation. Thanks, Spencer.
All right, everybody. That is it for this episode of the Evernest Property Management Show. We'll be back next week with a new episode.